Today we're talking about false gods, people who are in prominent positions in everything from wellness to spirituality, best-selling authors, health authorities, people in other prominent positions, people even just in your normal daily life who have abused the trust that you have put in them for personal gain. And we'll talk about how you can further protect yourself, how you can spot some of the BS that's out there. If this seems interesting to you, if you're curious, please stay tuned. So, hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Unpacking Possibility. I'm your host, Traci Stein. As always, I'm so happy to be here with you. This is an audio-only episode because I have not yet showered. I feel like it's probably better for me to, let you just imagine me as showered and groomed and put together. But that aside, what I want to talk about today, I was thinking about how to go about this, right? Because I know that so many people are so stressed these days that, maybe what you're hoping for in every episode is something a little bit lighter, something you can apply today. What I'm going to share with you today, you're going to feel like you have some tools, honestly, to help you protect yourself and live better, feel better, do better, live better. That's the aim of this podcast. But we live in a really challenging and complex time. We live in a time that, I hate to use the term reckoning because it sounds very biblical, and that's not even how I mean it. But we live in a time where a lot of stuff is coming to the surface, including about a lot of people, public figures, and maybe even local figures that we've put our trust in, who have absolutely purposefully solicited our trust and often our dollars. People who've kind of put themselves out there as wellness or spirituality gurus. And these are people in all walks of life, not just people in the wellfluencer arena. And you'll see what I mean in a moment. But some of them have started out probably with good intentions, and the desire for fame and power and money, I think, have taken them right off the tracks in a way that's not good for them and not good for us. But other people probably were never that great, or maybe ego always led the way. And what I'm hoping is by the end of this episode, not only are you giving yourself credit if you've had a weird feeling about somebody that everybody likes, and it doesn't even have to be that they've done something sinister, but lying to you and getting you to buy their books or go to their expensive workshops or sign up for a crazy expensive year-long mentoring or something with somebody who is not what they're purporting to be, right? Or somebody who's asking for your vote, or somebody who is asking for you to trust them with your kids' well-being or whatever. If you get a weird vibe, I want you to feel like you can trust it, that you are entitled to it, that you can take back your kind of own authority in terms of deciding who feels like a safe person for you and an okay person, or how much time you give yourself to decide that, or if maybe somebody has seemed great, now they don't, that you can give yourself permission to follow your gut instincts and to recognize them. We've talked about that more in recent episodes, but in the service of honoring yourself, again, I feel like this whole planet is going through this really difficult awakening right now. Let me get to more specifics, and I'll tell you what I mean. So I was inspired to do this episode by a post by Dr. Lissa Rankin. If the name sounds familiar, it's because she is an 8-time New York Times bestselling author. She's a physician. She's been on the lecture circuit. She's been with big publishers and still is. But she, like other people who are prominent health and wellness influencers in a good way, she's come out and been really frank and really courageous, I think, about talking about some of the dark side or the negative side of some of our favorite, I'm going to say, influencers, health influencers, spirituality, influencers. And that's not to discount that a lot of people are great. Again, people are, there's a whole range of people out there. And I think Lissa Rankin is one of the good people. What I'm going to do is just give you kind of a high-level overview of what she said, but I think it's really worth reading I'm going to put a link to her Substack article, which is free to read, but she does name names. I'll kind of let you know a little bit of some of the names she names. But what she talks about is her interactions with some of these people who are put out there as paragons of virtue, as the last word or the defining word in wellness and spirituality. And she talks about her kind of behind the scenes interactions with them at dinner or when being one of many speakers at a conference, and how different they are when the cameras aren't rolling, how different they are when when they want something, right? How their private behavior can be starkly different from what they are telling you to do. Now, my disclaimer before I even get into that is I know that we're all individuals. We are all imperfect beings. I do truly believe that each one of us has the opportunity to continue learning and growing. And I believe in redemption. I believe in repair. However, the people we're going to talk about today are not coming from that place. They want to keep on, I think, honestly, bamboozling you and maybe themselves. Who knows? So Lissa Rankin, in her Substack article that she posted part of on Facebook, she's talked about how we are in an era where, people are, a lot of good people are calling out these people like Peter Attia, who I mentioned in the last episode. A physician who didn't even complete his residency, can't be licensed, I don't believe, isn't certainly board certified, but who's put himself out there as a wellness authority and is all over the files. You know which files I'm talking about. Deepak Chopra. And honestly, I remember listening to Deepak's audio programs when they were still on cassettes, and I got benefit from them, and maybe you did too. It's a complicated thing, right? Because sometimes people have messages and information that truly can be beneficial. Or some of the information that they provide is truly beneficial, but other stuff is just, it goes down a different path. Or somebody puts themselves out as a guru, or they are spiritual bypassing or engaging in toxic positivity. I'm going to give you an example of that in a little bit. Of what I mean by that. But you may already know, like the people who tell you you can't be fearful because the only acceptable vibration is love, and that if you're fearful of something, the problem is you, or you're attracting only bad stuff to you and almost like you deserve the bad stuff that happens to you. Not true. We're seeing bad stuff happen to good people every single day, and maybe it's happened to you. And forgive me, I'm going to try not to swear too much, but that's a bullshit thing to say to people, especially people who are looking for someone to guide them out of a difficult time or a difficult inner space or a difficult situation, right? We look to people who've studied or have a degree or have learned more or have done the inner work to help us, again, feel, do, and live better. And there are lots of people who have lots of things to offer, but no one has it all. I'm going to talk about red flags in a little bit, but I want to get back to Lissa Rankin's post because she understandably is calling out people in the health and wellness community who aren't calling out the people who should know better and should do better, like Deepak Chopra, again, in the files, like Peter Attia, in the files. In the interest of disclosure, but in a way that feels safe for me at this time, because we live in a time when people can retaliate legally and otherwise. I want to be thoughtful about that. But honestly, somebody that I worked for, that I really wanted to believe in, whose book I had read before working for this person. I worked for this person 3.5 years, many years ago. So for 3.5 years, many years ago, I worked for this person. I felt that it was an important opportunity. I believed in the larger message of trying to help people be healthier. And generally, that is a good thing. You can figure out who this person is. I'm not going to say their name on the podcast. This is a person who made a Senate run. This is a person who is extremely smart and well-educated human being. This is a person who is a multi-best-selling author. This is a person who had a very successful TV show. And I'm going to tell you right now, for years, I have realized that the good in this person does not outweigh the not good, and I think, frankly, unethical and immoral things that they have been putting out there, like vaccine disinformation, like COVID disinformation, like, again, when they know better. I know they know the truth. This is an extraordinarily smart person. Again, you can look this person up if you want or not. I acknowledge this person in the release of my 2015 book and sent it to them. When somebody offers something positive that is inspiring, when they're extremely charismatic, we want to believe them. We want to believe that the negative stuff is the smaller part of the pie and that the good stuff outweighs it. I no longer believe that about this person. I believe this person could have been one of the most important positive influences on the health and well-being of a nation. I do not think that anymore. I think that the desire for money and power for some people is insatiable. It wouldn't matter. This is a profoundly wealthy person, already had a ton of influence. And again, I'm going to keep my swearing to the minimum, but they went down an immoral and bullshit road, in my opinion. It's my opinion. You judge for yourself. Lissa Rankin is really brave talking about the incredible narcissism in her experience, and she provides examples of some of the biggest wellness influencers. And I think it's okay for me to say who she named and the experiences she described because they're hers and she has published them. But Christiane Northrup, way back in the day, I think she was an incredibly important voice for women's health. I truly do. Lissa Rankin's experience of her was different. I think she went off the rails during the height of the COVID pandemic. I think she spread vaccine and other disinformation. And I got the impression she really believed it, but the science doesn't support what she said. And I think we have to have some faith in the science, understanding that in every walk of life, including science and medicine, there are people who have put forth things that are not true, that have distorted their findings. But I don't think that's the bulk of it. Lissa Rankin talks about Gabrielle Bernstein, who I never had a great feeling about. I bought one book and couldn't get through the first chapter, so I'm not an expert on her. But basically, in Lissa Rankin's Substack, she says that this woman wanted Lissa Rankin to write an endorsement of her book, even though she disagreed with what she was putting forth. I mean, she overtly said that she wanted her to lie. That's crazy to me. As a society, we need to do better. And I also understand, but let me just say personally, I just alluded to that, why it's so scary to call out people in positions of power. We are seeing more and more and more of that. And more of us are waking up to see that maybe politicians we believed in lied. I'm not even saying got it wrong or tried but weren't able to do something. They lied. And they tried successfully, honestly, to create division. There are a lot of false gods out there. A lot of these people achieve godlike status, and they haven't earned it. We deserve better. But I'm going to tell you, like my own therapist said, and yeah, of course, every therapist, by the way, if you've ever seen a therapist and they haven't been in therapy, you should not continue with them. Because if you haven't been on the other side of the desk, you're missing out on an opportunity to learn how to be a better therapist. If you haven't looked at your own stuff, you will keep acting it out. So that's not just my opinion, that's generally the opinion in the field. But anyway, my own therapist about 20 years ago said something that has always stuck with me. And what he said was, safety resides within. And I'm going to tell you why I'm bringing that up in relation to all of these false gods, right? These false messengers. Because I don't feel safe right now, and you probably don't feel safe right now. It's hard to know who to trust. We are in a time of incredible chaos, incredible division, when we're having huge division in our own families, in our own friend groups, with the people we work with. We're finding out day after day that people we put our trust in have been dishonest with us for selfish reasons. I'm not talking about getting it wrong and making a mistake. I'm talking about knowing it's BS and pushing a message because it benefits them. That's not everybody, and thank God, honestly. But it makes us feel unsafe because it makes us feel like, oh my God, I trusted this person, this public figure, or this person in my town, or whatever, or this colleague, or this institution. And now I realize my trust was misplaced. That somebody who should have known better and done better chose not to again and again. So the point of saying safety resides within is really the point, or a point, of this episode, because when we learn to pay attention to our own gut feelings, we can spot the BS better, or at least say, I'm not sure if this feels right, even though these other 10 things feel okay. This 11th thing is giving me pause. And then we learn to respect ourselves enough to maybe put that thing that makes us question something, maybe we put it on a shelf and wait for more data. Or maybe we say, you know what, even with those other 10 things, I got to learn to trust my gut because it's been right in these other instances. And that creates a sense of safety within. I know this episode may seem a little bit all over the place, but I think you get where I'm going with this. And by the way, if I've just named some people and you're like, I love their work has been a lifeline for me, then that may be your truth. And maybe that's what you go with. Or you say, you know what I've gotten is enough to offset the not good stuff. And I'm going to trust you to make that choice. And that's actually going to lead me into something else. We're talking about what I'm calling false gods. And again, it's people who knowingly put themselves out there as trustworthy, ethical, reputable, knowledgeable, but are deliberately misrepresenting what they're telling you. Again, this is not about our own, universal human fallibility. That is not what I mean. That's not what I'm talking about. I believe in growth. I believe in learning. I believe in, adjusting your course, the course of your life, or the course of how you work or how you teach or how you practice as you learn more, right? No one knows everything. We're always figuring it out. We're always growing. We're always becoming more aware of how what we say affects somebody. But we're in an era where institutions we trusted and relied upon, and people we've trusted and relied upon, have let us down. And again, in the interest of full disclosure, you know that I've said, I'm gonna name my former employer and where I went to school and tell you, it's a complex thing. I've said before, I'm a Columbia educated psychologist. That's true. I went to school there. I worked there. I feel like largely I got great training. I feel like there were also some of the most toxic people I've ever met at the institution. And that's kind of life. Like other institutions, whether prestigious or less well-known, that institution protected people, and still does, who they knew were not doing what they were supposed to, who weren't taking responsibility for what was happening in their laboratories and making sure that they were running up to par, or who were getting a salary for teaching and, on a lesser, at a lesser level of egregious things, and just were barely showing up and having their TAs teach their classes when somebody paid the crazy tuition to be taught by that person. I mean, there are people who are big people, some of whom I actually do know in the wellness world and in the spirituality world that I think are not great people. And I've never gotten a great vibe from them, or whose own students would have not great things to say about them. There are people who've had complaints filed against them. And Columbia is not the only place guilty of that. And again, there's so many great things about the institution and great people I've met. And I'm still largely glad that I trained there. And I feel like I am a better provider for what I learned, largely. But institutions, and it's not just universities, it's not just that university, it's companies, it's governments. It's in every sphere where there are people in a position of power who will give people a pass again and again, almost no matter what they do, because they bring in a lot of money, either from donors or from viewership or the publicity they generate, right? Or, from the procedures they offer or the patents they can come up with or whatever. That is a large problem. And again, when I was saying before the break about there's kind of a reckoning or an awakening, I mean, we're learning more about the stuff that has been going on under the surface. We're learning more about how people have abused our trust, including maybe made money off of that trust. And that's in many walks of life. I'm going to tell you a red flag to me, this is a clue. You see what you think. But somebody who is coercive, who makes you feel like a bad person if you don't share their academic opinion. I'm not talking even about something specific, but I'll talk about my own field. Somebody who's going to tell you their version or their treatment is the one true way. I have always said this, and I've said this to my students. If somebody puts themselves out there like the only person who knows, run in the other direction. If somebody decides that their one treatment is the only one that can work for, like I'm talking about psychology specifically, and this has been my experience where people have been like that and taught their students that. And if people put it out there like a religion, science isn't a religion. It is always evolving. And somebody who clings to their theoretical orientation as if it's a religion or an identity and it's unchangeable. And if it doesn't work for a specific patient, then it's the patient's fault, right? That it's supposed to work across the board. That is somebody who is not somebody I would refer to. And there are plenty of people I don't refer to. And it's not someone I think you should go to. If that's your experience, find somebody else. If you go to a healthcare provider, we don't even have to talk about celebrities or wellfluencers. If you go to a healthcare provider and you feel like they are devaluing of you as a person, or if you have questions about the treatment they're recommending and they won't answer it. I've had that experience. I think most people have. I think it's worth considering finding another provider. If you go to a provider and you feel like they're saying something that is denigrating to the group you're a part of, whether it's a misogynist statement or a racist statement or whatever, I think if you can, find another provider. It's not always that easy to leave a situation, right? If it's your employer and you really need the job. We find this in all walks of life. If somebody lies to you and you know they're lying, or you get what I'm saying. You get a sense in your gut when somebody isn't being straight with you, if somebody isn't being honest with you, or when it seems like the advice they're giving you is for them in some way, not you. Notice that feeling. And the better we take care of ourselves, the easier it's going to be to recognize that feeling for what it is, for intuition versus just our own fears, our own trauma, and so forth. And it's not always easy, but with practice, it gets a lot easier. If somebody is like, again, when I say don't take it when somebody is saying it's the one true way, to me, even with your religion, if your religion is saying everybody else is a sinner and going to hell if they don't believe this, that's not how I experience the divine. If that works for you, great. Doesn't work for me. That would be a key to run in another direction. or if somebody tells you you have a lower inherent worth or status because of your gender or some other factor, I don't think that's godly. But you get to decide. And in line with that, I've made this comment before, and it's kind of like a jokey version, or like, just kind of, I've always, I've said, you've heard me say before, hey, you don't have to buy what I'm selling. And by the way, usually I'm not selling anything, or if it's my $9.99 meditation, like, I don't feel like that's extortive. You get what I'm saying, though. I might say something on this podcast, and if you disagree, honor that. If it's not for you, it doesn't resonate, it doesn't feel right, honor that. I don't think I know the one true way that's going to work for everything and everyone. And I don't think anybody does. And if you agree with that and you get a weird vibe about something somebody says, honor that. And you always reserve the right to hold that with all of the other things you experience from someone, right? And weigh to what extent that's going to change your opinion of them. And again, I told you, my former boss, like, there were warning signs that I had heard about. I really wanted to believe this person wanted to do good and was just a fallible human being. I no longer believe that. I got to trust that, because I'm disrespecting myself if I don't. So I probably made that point over much. And listen, let me just say as my disclaimer, you know that I talk about things on this podcast like non-locality of consciousness, like psychic phenomena, intuition. I've talked about energy healing. I am somebody who has had mediumistic experiences my whole life, and I'm in a mediumship intensive 2-year training. That isn't for everybody. And I get that somebody might be like, well, how can I take your advice about, human nature or something when you're talking about these things? And I get it. If it's not for you, if I'm not the messenger, find the right one for you. I have a paranormal podcast. I talk about some wild stuff on that podcast. And it's literally one of the most fun things I do. I've always had an interest in that realm. That's my other podcast. But the point is, I will never tell you, you have to believe what I believe. And that's the key, right? I'm sharing what I have experienced. I've had incredible things happen with my own health and my own health challenges. And sometimes where I felt something very alternative has been helpful. But you'll notice that anytime I talk about health or a guest comes on and talks about health, you'll hear me say, consult with your doctor, consult with your healthcare provider. Because I don't want you to take the word of any one person, especially somebody on a podcast. It's information, and you get to consider it along with everything else. And again, when you get the vibe that somebody is not allowing you to have an independent thought, that's a red flag. And I know you know this, but people, for one reason or another, will solicit your trust and maybe don't deserve it. And if you get a weird feeling about it, please pay attention. No, listen, the institute I used to work at, where there were a lot of great things about it, there were people there I don't respect, that I don't think are great people. Most people are great people. But largely it was a good experience. I'm glad to have gotten to know and teach the students that I had. Largely, there's always a range. I had a lot of great colleagues. I had some good colleagues. I had one or two that I would never interact with again and never refer to. And that's kind of life. So, I just want to share information that can help us trust our own inner compass. You have it for a reason. I'm going to share one more story just as an example of a well-intentioned person who gave really bad advice. Because again, if you've noticed this, and this is a huge problem in the wellness community and the spirituality community especially. But years ago, I was asked to give, a series of kind of interactive lectures, workshops / lecture on the wellness training that I was doing. And I was one of several speakers. And throughout the day, maybe there were like 100 and something, I'm going to say, people in the audience who are also participants in these kind of mini workshops. But anyway, one of the other people who was brought in as a prominent wellness person was a Reiki master who has since passed away. And by the way, I have to say, she was absolutely lovely as a person. I think this person had incredibly good intentions. But there was a point where we were all in the same room and giving our spiels, and this person stood up and said, it's like, somehow, I don't even know how this got to this, but she was talking about her work in Reiki and energy and about cancer. And I think I was so blown away that I thought, well, where's this going? And to make a long story short, she started getting more and more kind of animated and talking about how chemotherapy is a poison and, that people shouldn't do. And I could see that there was a subset of the audience that was like nodding, like, yeah, okay. And there was a subset of the audience that was like, I'm not sure what to think. And there was a subset of the audience that was like, all right, this has gone off the rails. And I have to tell you, I said something to somebody in the administration after this who hadn't been there at this talk, did not know that this had taken place. And I said, this is insane. And again, nice person. Do I think Reiki can be helpful for some people, for some things, for some of the time? Absolutely. Do I think it is generally a harmless thing? Absolutely. Do I think it was harmful, even if unintentionally harmful, that this person with no medical training, basically said that people with cancer shouldn't get chemotherapy? Not the person to be able to make that statement. It was an incredibly inappropriate and unethical statement to make. It was a bad idea. And what I would tell you is, do not take medical advice from somebody who is not a physician. Don't take mental health advice from somebody who doesn't have any mental health training. People can be well-intentioned, people can be ill-intentioned. But the point is that safety resides within. You are the person who's honestly responsible at the end of the day. The only person who can really take care of you is you. So we may look for people to help us learn, to help us take care of our health, to help us improve habits that need improving. But we have to be more aware and also acknowledge what we don't know. And again, nobody can be an expert on everything, but I feel safer when I pay attention to how I feel. And if I don't know something, I try to go and look it up. And I know it's hard to do, and you may not have time to do it. And by the way, I'm not looking for a blogger to tell me what to do with my health care. I'm not looking for a government official who has zero training in health and medicine or public health, and who has, to me, an obvious collection of unhealthy health behaviors. You can probably tell who I'm talking about. I wouldn't look to them for health advice. I wouldn't look for somebody who denies the existence of germ theory, which is pretty well established, or tells you to drink raw milk. Now, there are politicians telling you to do that. There's a reason why we pasteurize milk. If you decide to do it, though, that's for you to decide, not me. I'm telling you my opinion. But you see what I'm saying. I mean, we know there are risks with eating raw meat and drinking raw milk, and we know that there's been a huge increase in outbreaks of measles for people who now believe the measles vaccine is more dangerous than measles. Be careful who you get your health information from. And again, you might say, okay, Traci, 80% of what you've said makes sense to me and 20% doesn't. Again, I can't take responsibility for what anybody else thinks. I can take responsibility for what I say. And sometimes we'll get it right, each one of us, and sometimes we won't. But I'm hoping what I shared today just makes you think a little bit about how you want to take care of yourself, not only with regard to your physical health, but with regard to how you learn to trust your own guidance, what some big red flags are, remembering that people can be a mixed bag, that we have to be careful about putting other people on pedestals. We do. Plenty of examples in the media, plenty of examples in pop culture, plenty of examples in our own communities of people who either used to deserve our trust and don't now, or maybe never really deserved it, and we're just learning. But my wish for you is that you take good care of yourself, find out what that means, be kind to yourself. We've all also, by the way, been bamboozled or made errors in judgment, and we're all, again, as I mentioned before, still learning and growing. Be kind and loving to yourself. You deserve it. Be kind and loving to your neighbor, even the ones that are hard. I got him, you got him, everybody's got him. Or even the ones we just maybe have been told to be, to fear, and maybe there isn't a reason to. Be kind to yourself, be loving to yourself. Each one of us has the potential to reclaim joy, to change the world for the better, to take good care of ourselves and our families, and to be more kind and loving. I hope this has been helpful. I want to hear what you think. As always, until next time, be well.